And our program guest this morning is the Minister for Sustainability, the Environment, Population, among other things, Tony Burke. Before that, we'll take a look at what the Sunday papers are saying this morning. And Brian Toohey, free trade prospects for the Asia-Pacific region might have been given an important boost. At least that's the interpretation. What do you make of it?
Well, that's that Japan has agreed to participate in further steps. These talks have been going on for over 20 years, I think, but this lot were in Honolulu last week where a US official had the panache to complain that Japan had high barriers on against imports of rural goods. That's true, but so does the United States. It has, for example, it will not let a single spoonful of sugar from Australia into the United States. In many ways, I think probably from Australia's viewpoint, the American bans are worse, despite the fact that we have a separate free trade agreement with the United States.
But is there anything we can read then into what the Japanese Prime Minister has said?
Well, it's better that they're in these, that they will continue to participate in these talks than not. That's fine.
OK, we won't get too excited just yet.
No.
George, more details on Barack Obama's itinerary when he visits this week, arriving Wednesday.
Samantha Maiden has a story in the News Limited papers today that Barack Obama is going to deliver a private pep talk to Cabinet. And he's apparently champing at the bit, and he's going to be holding brief talks with Tony Abbott as well. Now, I wonder what's going to happen in this Cabinet meeting. Is he going to say to them, this is how you win, or are they going to say to him, we ain't in as bad a place as you are at the moment?
What we have here is a meeting with the Cabinet. I think the interpretation of a pep talk might not necessarily be the case.
No, I think they're all quite keen to meet him, and I think he's quite keen to get out of a particular toxic environment that he's in the US at the moment.
But they wouldn't be wanting any political pointers, really, from him, would they?
I mean, George Bush and John Howard have said this to each other at APEC in 2007 when we hosted it in Sydney, and he had a look around the table and he said, "We're all lame ducks, aren't we?"
And Kerry-Ann, Kevin Rudd has thanked Indonesia for the way in which they've treated the 14-year-old boy on drug charges.
Yes, a very small piece in the Sun Herald, and also Julia Gillard will not be visiting the boy in jail. Now, Kevin Rudd may well be thanking the Indonesians for how they have looked after this 14-year-old who attempted to buy marijuana on the streets of Bali. But I don't know that the Indonesians will be necessarily thanking Australia for the way we treat their underage boys, 50 of whom are in Australian jails. They have been caught on alleged people smuggling boats. They've been enticed onto those boats as chefs and deckhands and whatever. Just last week, an intellectually disabled Indonesian orphan, a 15-year-old, was released from Sydney jail, obviously because of his condition. And, I mean, it's just scandalous that we kick up this enormous stink about an able-bodied 14-year-old Aussie doing the wrong thing in Bali, and yet we're allowing these kids to languish in Australian jails, some of whom are in pitiful conditions and didn't even know they were on asylum seeker boats.
Maximum security, I think, in this case.
Maximum security, and there's been a 14-year-old boy in a Perth jail for 2 years in maximum security. The Australians use a discredited wrist X-ray test to determine their ages. They've had 33 prosecutions tossed out because the information against the boys is invalid or not proven. I just think it's scandalous that Australia should be kicking up the sort of stink that we are about this young kid while we're look at what we're doing to these kids.
In every case, these people have gone to jail because of the AFP evidence based on the X-rays, and the DPP is prosecuted. It's only when Australian lawyers have managed to go up to Indonesia, to the remote islands where these kids come from, and get some evidence about how old they really are, that they then come back and the DPP is forced to drop the charges. In some cases, the parents, quite scandalously, haven't even known that their kids have been in Australian jails. They thought they were drowned at sea because they hadn't heard any more about them.
And this X-ray, just briefly, Barry, this X-ray test has been discredited by world experts, UNICEF and the Australian Medical Association.
Now, George, new research released on the impact of the carbon tax.
Yeah, now the CSIRO have had a look at the household impact of the carbon tax, and they've belled the cat on this one, that it's actually not a big tax, and the impacts on households are about half the impact of the mining boom, which we think is a good idea for the economy, and a quarter of the GST. Now, that's not dissimilar to the Treasury's own modelling of it. Begs the question whether we've gone in hard enough if what we're trying to do is reduce emissions. And of course, this is what the government are banking on, that the betwixt and between position that they've taken, most households will feel that nothing actually happened on July 1 next year, and they've got a bit more money in the bank. For those who still think that the emissions reduction is what this is all about, will probably wonder why we didn't go harder. And of course, the politics is the reason why we didn't go harder.
The CSIRO, though, figures are only marginally different to Treasury. It's just 0.6 compared with 0.7 or something.
Yeah, but whichever way you cut this carbon price, it pretty much applies just on energy, and the rest of the economy, there's a little bit of flow through to the rest of the economy, but most other prices aren't affected by this thing. The GST, which as CSIRO and Treasury have said is 4 times the inflation impact, affected every price in the economy. And what we found with the GST, of course, nobody wanted to roll the thing back after a year of implementation. So this is obviously the thing that the Labor government are hanging out for, that the reality is a lot less worse than the rhetoric that's led up to it.
We'll talk more about the prospect of a rollback a little later on, and that's the Sunday papers. And now next on the government to-do list, come up with a water plan for the Murray-Darling Basin that at least, well, in part anyway, satisfies both the irrigators and the environmentalists. The draft plan's due out in 2 weeks. Stand by for the protests. Our guest this morning is the Minister responsible for the Environment and Water, Tony Burke, who joins us in our Sydney studios.